Good evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you happen to be in the world. I'm going to talk about polling results today. There has been some breaking news. I better just cover first thing. Caroline Lucas announced that she's stepping down at the next election, and Rishi Sunak has announced that he's going to allow Boris Johnson's honours list through. But I'll talk about that on my own channel later, I think, because what I want to talk about is the big news. As this is Labour Social, we spend a lot of time going on about other parties, but Labour. There's been a big poll come out this week, a megapoll as it's been talked about, analysing Labour's chances in the election, and I'll go over some of the details. And for those not watching live, I will put a link to the poll in the description below later, or Graham will. But I just want to go through the sort of headline results, but also what it means, because there's been a few commentators saying, oh, it means this or it means that. And it's like, no, it doesn't. So the headline figures, first of all, so this was an MRP poll, which is multi-level regression and post-stratification poll, which is a very complicated way of saying what some pollsters do, right, is they look at the national share of the vote or the swing, and they just translate it on a seat-by-seat basis. But this is absolute rubbish, because in some seats it'll say the Conservatives will have like negative votes, which is obviously not going to happen. An MRP poll looks at types of voters. It says, well, which types of voters are swinging from this party to this party, or will vote for this party or this party. And they look at, on a constituency-by-constituency basis, what are the breakdown of voters with those particular characteristics. So it allows you to come up with a fairly accurate poll. And it has proven itself. YouGov, in particular, have proven themselves in the 2017 and 2019 election with this method. So it's a good method. It's not perfect, but it is a very good method. And the headline results are NADS is going to the Lords. Yes, I'm afraid NADS is going to the Lords. But don't worry, because Keir Starmer is going to abolish the House of Lords. So she's only got a little bit of time left. But yeah, so the headline figures from this MRP poll is that best case scenario is Labour win 470 seats and the Tories are on 129. Happy days, but that is the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that Labour win 316 seats, which is just short of a majority, and the Conservatives have 286, not that far behind them. Now, it's worth pointing out, because I say that best case and worst case scenario, I don't mean that the pollsters, because that sounds like a huge margin for error, doesn't it? That's like, okay, well, you're just basically guessing, aren't you? It doesn't mean the pollsters have a huge margin for error on their results, although there is a margin for error. It's based on different scenarios. So there are two main things they're having to take into account, and they come up with different models for them. The first is the impact of Reform UK, because they are going to have a significant impact on the election results, just as the Brexit Party, their former guys, did in 2019. For example, because the Brexit Party stood candidates in Labour seats, that actually helped Labour retain. So, I mean, for example, Yvette Cooper was gone. She's not an MP at the moment if Brexit Party had stood down candidates everywhere. But at the same time, if the Brexit Party had stood candidates everywhere they said they would, and they hadn't stepped down for Conservative candidates, Boris Johnson wouldn't have won either. Would have been back into hung Parliament territory, at least, maybe even Labour territory. So Brexit Party had a huge impact in 2019, and Reform UK will also, they're polling to have a similar impact in the next elections. But Richard Tice, who's the chair of Reform UK, he read the poll, or so he said, he pretended to. And he said, these poll results show that Reform UK will beat Labour into hung Parliament territory. It's like, no, it doesn't. What the poll says is if Reform UK, or as far as they're concerned, if Reform UK stand all the candidates they say they will, Labour get 470 seats, which is a ridiculous majority. If they stand them down in Tory marginals like they did last time, then Labour only get 401 seats. So actually what it's saying is the difference between them standing and not in Tory marginals is the difference between Labour getting an extra 69 seats. But either way, that is still a massive Labour majority and a bigger one that they will probably realistically get. So, Reform UK standing candidates actually takes Labour from a huge majority to an epoch-shattering monumental majority. Because I want people to think about what these figures mean. So, in theory, there are 650 MPs. So you think to yourself, well, for a bare majority, you need 326, right? Now, in reality, you don't, because Sinn Féin don't take up their seats, so they never vote. And the speaker is independent. So you don't actually need that many seats. It's more like 319, 320 seats. But we go with 326. So if you had 470 seats, you've got a majority of 290. Which is insane. That would be ridiculous. Even with the 401 seats forecast, if the Reform UK did the Tories a solid, then that's still a majority of 152, which is absolutely insane. Right, before I go on, as there's been some comments, let's try and catch up with some comments here, if I can find some that are relevant to it. There's a nice little Blackadder misquote here. You made Nadine Dorries a lord? Yeah, well, she'll be a baroness, really, I suppose, won't she? But yeah. Is this what Best for Britain we're talking about yesterday? Yes, this is the poll that was commissioned by Best for Britain. As I say, I'll make sure there's a link in the description below later on. Carol Vorden was talking about this on the James O'Brien show, so I didn't watch that. If you could get her on this channel, it would be amazing. Yeah, well, that's Graham's the PR side of things. I'm very bad. I can't even get people onto my own channel. I sometimes approach people think, well, why don't you do interviews? Max does interviews. Max is obviously very, very charismatic. Whenever I try to contact people and say, oh, would you like to do some of my channel? Even sometimes when I get a few go, oh, that might sound interesting, they never get back to me. I've never been able to get it. It's not that I don't try. I don't try very hard, admittedly. But I occasionally try and get someone on. They know they can't be asked. But anyway, if I were Reform UK, I'd want a Labour hung parliament. Wouldn't that increase the chances of PR? Yes. But as I say, the Reform UK's input into it is all they can do by standing is cost the Conservatives. They can't cost Labour. So they've got no say in the matter, really. But anyway, so let's carry on with a little bit, because there was another model they put in as well. So that's the impact of Reform UK. Basically, if Reform UK stand in Tory seats, the Tories will lose lots of extra seats, right? But if the Reform UK don't stand against the Conservatives, Labour is still going to win big. But then there's the other thing. Now, one thing that pollsters have been grappling with is the don't knows. At the moment, there's always going to be a lot of don't knows. These are people who have the sort of profile of they're likely to vote, but at the moment, they're not saying who they will vote for. So what this particular poll did is they categorized them according to their educational profile, and they looked at them and said, okay, so with people with a similar educational profile, who do they tend to vote for? And we will assume that you will vote in the same way, which is reasonable. It does actually work out pretty reasonably. So what they found, and this massively favors the Conservatives, and it makes sense at the moment, that you can imagine. See, there's a lot of people who are like Labour supporters are going, okay, yeah, I'm happy to vote Labour because, they're back on the march to power. Lots of Liberal Democrat voters go, of course, they're happy to vote Lib Dem. Same thing with other parties. But Conservatives, if you're a Conservative voter, you look at the Conservatives at the moment and you think, are you proud of them? Really? Are you proud of what they've done to the country and how they're behaving? Not really. There's a lot of Conservatives who are not really impressed. So there's a lot of Conservative voters, much like Labour voters in 2019, looking at it and going, and they can't bring themselves to say they'll vote Conservative. But come the election, if they vote, there's a good chance they will just hold their nose and go, well, it's better than Labour. So what they're suggesting is, based on this redistribution, it's if Reform UK do stand everyone, then Labour will get, and this redistribution happens in favour of the Conservatives, then Labour will get 370 seats. So that's still a big majority. That's a 90-seat majority. The hung Parliament territory is if Reform UK stand aside for the Conservatives and those who are currently saying don't know distribute themselves according to that educational profile, then you end up with Labour in 316, which, as I say, in theory is 10 seats short, but in practical terms is about 3 seats short. And that's the worst case scenario. And for that worst case scenario to happen, all of those Tory voters who are currently saying don't know have to go out and vote Tory. And bear in mind, some of them will. Absolutely, a significant number will. They will do what everyone does in an election. They'll go, I'm not happy with the stance that my preferred party is taking on this, or this, but I will hold my nose because I still think it's better of the two options, right? But there'll be a lot of them will stay at home. Because you've got to look at the situation. The Conservative Party is bitterly divided at the moment. And that division does not just extend to the Parliamentary Party, it extends to their voters as well. There will be Boris Johnson fans who go, well, I'm not voting Conservative. I want Rishi Sunak to lose. It'll teach him a lesson. Or there'll just be more moderate ones who will go, well, I'm not going to vote for this hard Brexit Conservative Party. Because there's plenty of Conservatives who are not Brexiteers at all by any stretch of the imagination. So there will, and the thing, there was a lot of Conservative voters held their nose in 2019. They didn't like Boris Johnson. They held their nose because they really hated Jeremy Corbyn. They don't really hate Keir Starmer. So, it's they're out of that redistribution that I've done in this poll. It will not be to the nth degree. There'll be a lot of those people who will just not vote for anyone. So the reality is, if you look at this polling, it's not going to be at the top end. Labour are not going to get 470 seats. It's not good. And I think Reform UK, by the way, will stand their candidates, because if they don't, they'll lose all credibility, because it'll be 2 elections in a row where they said they were going to stand candidates and then didn't, or they pulled them to help the Tories out. They will lose all credibility. They'll be like the boy who cried wolf. So I think they're going to stand. I think they're going to use it to try and teach the Tories a lesson. I think they're going to afterwards say, right, the price for us standing aside is you adopting policies we approve of, right? I think they want to stand. I think they will stand. So I think that's going to boost Labour no matter what happens. And I also think if you look at this redistribution, some of them will hold their nose and go and vote Conservative, and that will help them. But I also think there's a good chunk who won't. They just won't bring themselves to vote for the Conservatives. They'll either stay at home or they'll have a protest vote. They'll vote for a fringe candidate or sort of Lib Dems or something like that. I think, if you look at this poll, what it's basically saying is Labour are going to win a hefty majority. It's not going to be the stupid majority, but it is going to be a hefty one. Does MRP polling take tactical voting into account? Not when there's going to be an increase in tactical voting. So you're quite right to bring that up. So it's based on normal voting behavior. And of course, these things are refined all the time. But it's based on, so if there's an heightened level of tactical voting, which is also expected next year, then yes. So the polling won't take account of that. Polling also doesn't take account of the quality of the candidate. So it's also worth bearing in mind, where you've got a very good candidate, they can add value to it. When you've got a very bad candidate, they can lose value as well. Oh, wait, I'm missing something. How is the 370 seats a 90-seat majority? Because, so if you think 325 is the midpoint, so you get 45 seats that way, but you've also taken 45 seats off the so your majority is like double, because the opposition are 45 seats the other way. Like if you get 325 seats exactly, then that means you've got 325 seats. Technically, there's 324 MPs on the opposition because there's the speaker. But if for every one you get above that, you've also taken one off the opposition, so it's worth 2. So your majority is always how many seats you have minus 325, basically times 2. There's you can complicate it a little bit by saying, well, the speaker's in the middle, so you've actually got +1 as well. But yeah, that's how that majority works out that way, because for everyone above the midpoint you've taken one off the opposition as well. What do I think about the new election boundaries in the Northeast? The committee wants to gigantify Conservative majority rural constituencies. So the boundary changes were obvious. I mean, it's that whenever they happen, it's always gerrymandering by whichever party does it. You can always come up with some justification for doing it, and that's fine. If it were an incredibly tight election, yes, it's been designed. It's designed to basically create safer Labour seats, but fewer of them, and create more seats in Tory voting areas. So, for example, there are fewer seats in Scotland and in the north, but there's more seats in the Tory heartlands. And they justify it by, and it is reasonable in a way, they justify it by saying, well, we're making it so that it's roughly equal populations, which, okay, fine. But because it's not looking like a tight result, it doesn't actually, it's not going to matter. And I'm hoping before it is a tight election in the future, it'll be PR, we'll have proportional representation. I know I'm hoping rather than having anything to pin it on, but I do think we have a reasonable chance of pushing proportional representation. Gary saying, I'm in Chelmsford and a stuffed puppet would be elected under the Tory ban and no point in voting. Unfortunately, that is the case I would still vote. I would always encourage people to vote. Because at the end of the day, all you have to do, I mean, is walk down the street and put a cross in a box. And if you don't want to do that, get a postal ballot. Just because the more people do vote, the thing is, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. When one party has such a large majority, and but if lots of people suddenly started voting, and that majority came down, then you might get more people going, oh, actually, this could be flippable. But yeah, in reality, 3/4 of all the seats, at least, are not going to change. When you're talking about, like, we're expecting a huge number of seats to change hands next year, but we're still talking probably like a quarter. You're not talking that they're all up in the air. Most seats, the vast majority of seats, are just going to stay the same. That's unfortunate there. Don't forget to manage Sinn Féin. Well, I sort of alluded to those at the start, but because I can't know how many seats Sinn Féin will win, I can't possibly take off the right number for that at this moment. If there's a hung parliament and we have a referendum for PR, it has to be undertaken 2.5 years into the term. Need to explain how MPs are selected, communities represented in PR. Well, you'd need to sort out the system. But as I say, the polling unless something spectacular happens, what the polling is saying is there is no realistic chance of a hung parliament. Even with this modelling, the hung parliament, and it only happens by like 3, realistically. For the hung parliament scenario to happen, Reform UK have to stand down candidates in Tory seats. I don't think they're going to do that. In fact, I'm 98% certain, 98.2% certain that they're not going to do that. And all of those don't knows have to hold their nose and vote Tory. And I just think the country's in such a mess and the Tories are in such a mess that it would be highly unusual for that to happen. Usually when the party of government is in a complete mess and the country is seen as not being run according to their ideals, you will always have some of your core support stay at home. That always happens. But anyway. Also assumes that the Tories won't behave appallingly between now and the election. Yeah, well, okay. So let's discuss a few other ways in which actually the polling could get worse. There is one way in which the polling could get better for the Conservatives. That is, they are going to have their campaign strategists running their campaign. At the moment, election campaigns are run by Conservative MP Greg Hands with his note, his joke note. So when these by-elections come up, so we're going to have a couple of Tory by-elections coming up, probably in the autumn. Greg Hands will be going around with his joke note. He's the one who's going to be running that campaign, right? Come the election, it's Isaac Levidow, a professional campaign strategist, the guy who masterminded Boris Johnson's mayoral wins for London and the 2019 general election. Someone who knows what he's doing. It's not going to be left to Greg Hands and Rishi Sunak, amateurs. So their campaign will be a lot better than we have been used to them, but he can only do so much, right? You can't make a silk purse out of a pig's ear, as they say. But in terms of how it could still get worse for the Conservatives, first of all, people are still giving Rishi Sunak time on his pledges, even though they don't think he's doing well on them. They're still not going to think he's doing well on them. The other thing is, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, has recently said he supports the Bank of England's move to keep raising interest rates, even though we are getting close to the tipping point where it could cause a recession. So the Chancellor has announced that he is happy for the country to go into recession in general election year. So yes, the polling situation could get worse for the Conservatives. In fact, you know, I'm talking about this Best for Britain poll. The latest YouGov poll has just come out, and that has Labour on a 19-point lead over the Conservatives. And again, YouGov are one of the two that actually come up with accurate. When the general election results actually come out, their results look pretty accurate. For the next general election, more than any other I can remember, everyone should vote. I suspect there'll be a lot of opportunity for surprise results. They should. Not everyone will vote, but you know. But I do go back to the point. Sorry, I've forgotten who made it. Someone made that there will be a heightened sense of tactical voting. So again, and so the things in favour of the Conservatives, we think about it in terms of changing this polling result, because there's still another year to go at least, or round about a year to go. In the Conservatives' favour, they're going to have a much better campaign. They're going to have a professional campaign run. They're going to play a lot of dirty tricks. Do you remember in 2019 when they turned the Conservative Party official social media accounts? They changed them to make it look like they were independent fact-checking accounts. That should be illegal. But that's what they did. And they'll pull all the same, it's the same person running it. They'll pull all the same dirty tricks and new ones as well. So they will claw something back. Against it is heightened level of tactical voting. The fact that there will be, you know, the economy could be in much worse shape because the government actively supports us going into recession, as mad as that sounds, or at least risking recession. And also, who knows, Labour may actually get better at presenting their messages. Labour may actually themselves step up their game. Let's have a look. Even if you're in a safe Tory seat, vote, even if all you do is reduce their majority. If MPs are fearful for their seats, they're less likely to extreme nut jobs. This is true. If you look at most of the actual swivel-eyed loons in the Tory party, they're in safe seats. And that is because someone like Nadine Dorries couldn't win a marginal constituency. She's a Fruit Loop. Couldn't do it. Tories are bringing legislation to restrict some EU citizens permanently living in the UK. Yeah, they haven't got long to do that. That can be changed quite quickly, don't you worry. The thing is, the Tories are talking about lots of legislation at the moment. They've now got very limited time, right? There's a little bit of legislation passing through before summer, Then when they come back, they may not come back until after conference season, new session of parliament. They've basically got a few months. Yes, yes, they're going to prioritize their most evil legislation, but they're going to have, depending on when they have the general election, they're going to just have a few months. They're now so limited in what they can do. We have to be prepared for the dirty tricks and try and counter them. Yeah, I just think that the Conservatives are too far behind. If it was looking tight, then yeah, it would be right to be worried. Labour have to be worried. Labour can't be complacent, of course, but I think I've said this for a while now. I can sit on the sidelines and thinking the way it's going is just, I can just see this. I can't see the Conservative. I cannot even see Labour getting like a small majority, and that's fantastic. Well, fantastic for a Labour supporter, but I mean fantastic as in you shouldn't be able to believe it. Like, you know, a fable type fantastic. It's if you think about Labour where they are now, about roughly 200 seats. You know, they need the largest swing to get anything like a proper majority. They need the largest swing in election history, and they look like completely destroying the record. I'm going to have to find out what the record is. They'll utilize the political mastermind known as 30p League. Right, okay. Last comment should probably be, no, they won't. Right, here, let me remind people what happened in 2019. So Isaac Levidow, remember, he's running the show, right? Priti Patel was the Home Secretary. She wasn't allowed to say anything. She was told to go and sit in the corner and be quiet because Isaac Levidow did not want the toxic Tories being involved in the campaign, right? Then Jacob Rees-Mogg said something really, I forgot what it was now, but he opened his mouth in the early stages and then he was banished to the naughty step as well. So Isaac Levidow will be aware, excuse me, of who are the biggest assets to the Tory party and who are the biggest obstacles to the Tories winning. And he will tell, at the moment, see, the cabinet and various positions within the Tory party are chosen according to keeping the Tory party from infighting. Isaac Levidow won't be interested in that. He will be going, right, okay, you lot appeal to the public. I need you to put in a shift. You lot are toxic. You go away. You go on holiday. I mean, campaign in your own seats where you won't do any harm because they're all safe seats because you could never have won a marginal. But there we go. Lewis Goodall on LBC yesterday. The next show election will be December 24th. The Tories will delay for as long as possible. No. Someone mentioned that in a stream I was doing last night. I don't know whether he's been serious or not. I don't want to dismiss any particular date. The Conservatives do not want a winter election. I absolutely guarantee that. The NHS will be in utter ruins. It would be, and it was in 2019. There were people being dumped on floors in corridors in hospitals because there weren't even trolleys, let alone beds left. But that was the anyone but Corbyn type factor. They don't have that this time round. It would be madness to have a winter election. Utter madness. They want a summer one. Right, Maggie May, thank you for the super chat. When senior MPs are told to STFU, that is bad. Yeah, because they're utterly broken as a party, the Conservatives now, completely broken. Their senior MPs are chosen because of their representation of the various loony factions. But Levidow is not interested in the loonies, he's interested in the assets. So if Levidow can only use vaguely likable Tories, the campaign is going to be a solo Sunak show. There are some that are fine. There are some that are okay. Whether they can be asked with it or not, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. But I just think that he will organize them well, but it'll be like herding cats. There's only so much you can expect of him. I don't think the 2024 general election is something that he is going to want to put on his CV. And last comment here says Labour have a big job in their first term. That the need to show people a better standard of living, resolve the strikes, and sort out public services. Yes, they do. They do. But they, there's every confidence that they will do that as well. But there we go. We'll call it there. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Don't forget to click the like button and to subscribe, and check the description below for links to various things. Have a good day, and until next time, I'll see you later.